Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday edition of the Comic Art Collector Conversation. It's the 11th one, and a fine group of panelists this evening. And actually, I don't have everybody's name showing up here. Let me modify that. I'm sorry, I should have had that on there. Show display names. There we go. We got Fisch. Uh-oh. All right, I'm hearing something in the background. That was you? James.
Oh, my laptop was on mute. My bad, man. We're all good.
All right. Well, it's good to have everybody back. I haven't seen some of you in a while, Mikhail and James for sure, and Fisch and Chris. We've chatted recently, but hey, before we start everything off, I wanted to share something that I thought was it's a topic, but not a topic that needs to be talked about for 15 minutes. But it's the act of recycling one's packing materials. And I had picked something up from Nick Barucci a few weeks back on one of his Friday shows, the one that I helped him moderate. And the art was sent to me, several layers of overnight board. And then on the inside, it was so funny to open up a package that was addressed from Marquet to Jordan. So not to show off Jordan's mailing address or anything on there, but the point being is that this board went from splash page to Jordan and then made its way to Nick, and then it made its way to me. So I'm sure, I can put this question to everybody, but I'm sure you all do the same thing. You always hoard the good material, right, as far as the packing material, and reuse it.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Just shipped out something today. And actually, I think I saw Mikhail's garage, man. He's got a whole, back channel or something with all the package material too. But I don't want to go out and buy it.
Exactly.
The funny thing is with the art, when you use the same packing material, you're usually sending a different piece of art. But with the statues I used to collect, they come in a piece of styrofoam with a colored box. And on top of that, there's a brown shipper box, but that box is made specifically for the size of that statue. So sometimes you'd buy a statue from someone and they always send it in the same brown shipper box, and you'd see like the 7 different people who own the statue before you. And sometimes someone would claim they got it straight from Randy Bowen. It was like they were the first owner, but then you pull off the label and there's like 4 other labels beneath, and they were full of it, So.
Well, not to transition to the statue world, but from a collectability standpoint, don't people look for that brown box as well when they're buying a new statue?
Yeah, if you're missing the box, you lose like between 10 and 50%, but that's not the brown box. That's actually the art box usually. Yeah.
Hot Toys, they want the shipper too.
Yep.
Huh. Well, I'll tell you, when we jump in the topic, that's one of the things where buying and hoarding art, man, you start collecting materials and you save a little bit of money on shipping costs.
Marcus, you couldn't even wait 2 minutes in, huh?
No, he couldn't. Well, but I can tell you one thing, because I'm good friends with Marquet. I know that he makes a trip to either Home Depot or Lowe's once a week and has them cut up his masonite for him. So while we all get to recycle his good work, I know that he literally makes at least one trip a week because he's always shipping and always uses masonite. So that's funny. I think this is probably the 3rd one I've got with his name on it in the last couple of years.
Small pet peeve is when you pay a significant amount of money for art and it comes in 18 USPS priority boxes all slammed together with some cheap duct tape on it. Okay, man. So you just robbed the post office to go ahead and send me this, but that's all good. It got here.
All right. Well, the USPS used to not allow you to send anything if it was taped on the outside with duct tape. So maybe they've relaxed those rules, because they wouldn't let me ship art a few times about 10 years ago when I tried walking in with 6 or 7 packages with duct tape on all the edges of my boxes.
And the worst is when you can't get the art out without damaging it because the tape is put in weird places. Whether the tape is right next to the art or whether the tape is all over the plastic. And even if you cut it, you're just worried you're going to bend or rip the art. That's always frustrating, but.
Yeah, usually when you buy from collectors, especially collectors that are pretty obsessive compulsive like I am, like all the tape has all folds on them, so you can easily rip it off. If I get a package from Mikhail, it's a custom label, and I actually keep his labels. So that's one of the neat parts of the shipping side. I don't reuse his packaging material because it's almost art itself.
Thank you for that, Ron. Clearing that up. And yes, I've saved the one and only package I got from Mikhail as well. And we'll never reuse it because it's a work of art. All right.
Mikhail, this packaging is becoming like urban legend almost.
It is legendary.
Yep.
All right, so let's get ourselves started on the regular topics. And James, you get to lead us off this evening.
Yeah. So I wanted to start out on a light note. This actually came from some multiple discussions a couple of weeks ago when I was talking to some buddies, and scratched my neck a little bit. But it's a comic art addiction. So not the lightest topic, but what I wanted to do, and I wanted to make this pretty panel open discussion focused. It's not so much talking about the nature of addiction or anything along those lines. I'm not a doctor or addiction specialist by any stretch of the imagination, but it's what are kind of the unique aspects within the comic art collecting hobby that can lead to someone going more along the addiction route versus the collector route. And to kind of set a little base, I kind of see, all hobbies, of course, have some type of addictive element. All collectors have that personality trait that kind of leans itself toward a bit of excess, right? There's a balance on catching that. There's a balance on identifying when things are going too far, and there's a balance on setting what's right for you. But I pretty much see like kind of addiction as when the hunt for a certain piece, or the acquisition for the piece, or the feedback associated with the piece takes a higher priority in your collecting kind of habits than the actual ownership and appreciation of the piece you have. So when everything superfluous to actually owning the art elevates in priority than actually owning it, well, we're kind of teetering on the edge from an addiction example, right? And so, from an anecdotal standpoint, something that happened to me recently is I just paid off 2 days ago the most expensive piece of art I've ever bought ever. Excited for it, excited to come in. And what I found myself doing yesterday is surfing Comic Art Tracker for what's the next one. I don't even have it here. I spent more money on this single piece than I have on any other piece of art in my entire collection, and I'm already on Comic Art Tracker trying to find out, what's the next acquisition, what's the next thing I can plan for before I hang that piece on the wall. So I'm like, well, maybe I got to kind of check in with some peer groups and stuff and tell them, my name is James and I've got a problem. But and a lot of us joke about it too. And like I'm in part of some groups that are, name stuff like Comic Art Addicts or Comic Art Anonymous or something. So everyone recognizes there is that element of that. But, to kind of talk, I'll start the panel discussion, and I'll give one example of how I see the comic art hobby is unique from an addiction standpoint, and then just, kind of get feedback from everyone and start the discussion that way. But, me and Fisch had kind of a discussion a few weeks ago, and he alluded to it when we were talking about large pieces, collectors with some pretty elite galleries, right? And one of the unique aspects of comic art collecting is we kind of all play in the same playground. Bill, you created an amazing site with CAF, but with CAF, you post your collections, and your collections interact, or you can interact directly with people with resources, multiple times, even magnitude times more than you have personally. And so, Fisch actually mentioned this, but what happens sometimes is instead of like, the old term, keeping up with the Joneses, doing what your neighbors do, trying to, maintain that status quo, a lot of people find themselves trying to keep up with the Rockefellers, right? People that have, means way outside, just the nature of reality of what you're able to, kind of do yourself. And so do you see yourself comparing your collection and maybe, being dissatisfied with your own collection when you compare yourselves to, people that have these elitist things? Are you trying to acquire things similar? And is that a detriment sometimes to your financial resources or your goals or what you're doing? And so that's just something to be aware of from a, kind of a comic art addiction standpoint. But, I'll start with you, Mikhail. Anything from a thought on anything else unique in the hobby that leads itself toward kind of that addictive nature?
I think like we saw in chat, everybody's had these feelings of what am I doing, and is it too much, and what is enough? And later on in this show, I'm going to give you some tips on managing a large collection. So it's I think, though, at the end of the day, they really just a person that's collecting how they feel about their work. And I'll definitely admit, that no, it's not. I won't admit, but you will see people posting things, and I think it's perfectly okay to a sense of frustration. But there's so many ways, particularly in this hobby, to look at someone's acquisition in a different way outside of.
Hey, Mikhail. I was just now that Ankur has said it as well, your mic is actually echoing a bit. It's or kind of popping in and out, and even duplicating some of the things you say just a little bit. I'm assuming everybody's hearing the same thing.
It's like those old that game Myst. Those guys in the books who talk to you from that game Myst. It sounds kind of like that.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we wanted to go first, Mikhail, is this is actually an intervention for you. So, no, I mean, you're fine.
Which bad habit, though? Is it the art?
Say it again, Mikhail.
Is that better for everyone?
It is.
Yeah, much better. It's a little different sound, but it's not making the same echo.
Right. I switched to mics is all.
Okay.
So what I was saying was that, I'll take Dinesh as an example. He puts up these monster pieces that anyone would be proud to acquire and display, and because they have a historical reference and they're just amazing pieces. But you can put everything that anyone like that does in context, particularly if it's how long they've been collecting, because that brings with it a whole nother magnitude of wealth that's accumulated over time in the value of your pieces. So somebody could have less money, but started 15 years ago, and they're going to be posting pieces that someone who has more resources at the moment still couldn't achieve, because the relative value of those things is different to acquire. That I bought a Bill Sienkiewicz piece in 2000 for $1,000, and now I'm selling it for $20,000. Just for example. So then suddenly I have $20,000 to buy a nice big cover and post it, and everyone's like, "Wow, that's great." So and then the other thing that's great about original art that I've said before is that when it comes to a piece that you own, you have the best of that piece. So we always say love what you buy and buy what you love. When you open your portfolio, when you look at the pieces, or when you see it on your wall, if it evokes those feelings of enjoying it the same way that when you decided to buy it, then that's fine, that's worth it. Where you get into trouble, I think, is exactly what you're talking about, is when you put it into a portfolio, you don't think about it, you don't look at it. And that's a valid way of collecting if that's the way you want to do it. And you can afford to sustain that momentum. But if you keep doing that and you're taking resources from other places, I think that's the only time in which it becomes a problem. Otherwise, you're just a successful collector.
Yeah. Well, and kind of the reverse side of when you own that piece, that's you made the comment that that's the best piece available because of the one-on-one nature. And I think one of the other aspects that kind of leads to, acquiring outside your means for some people, right? This is not a blanket statement from collectors in general, but the one-to-one nature of the art that we collect. Ankur mentioned it on a topic a long time ago. There's a ton of FOMO, fear of missing out. And so when you see something pop up, you get that adrenaline rush where, do I need to grab this now? Versus, do I need it? Do I need it in my collection? Does it elevate anything whatsoever? So, with other hobbies that are out there for the most part, there's limited edition sets or something along those lines. At the end of the day, there are multiple copies, there are multiple opportunities to possibly acquire something. But when you're talking about a one-on-one nature, I think that drives a lot of people for impulse buying more than maybe some of the other hobbies that are out there.
And I think it's noticing what some people were saying in the chat. It's important to distinguish impulse buying from the hunt, because the hunt has many satisfying components to it. If you're someone whose mind is kind of always working and you like to work multiple problems in the back of your head and you're thinking about one thing and then you have research that comes together, you follow avenues and you find something that was unfindable. That's fun and that's engaging and that can be a very rewarding part of the hobby as well. Versus just flipping and flipping and flipping until you say, oh, I like that, I'm going to buy that. I can justify it to myself for some reason or the other.
Yeah. And I see, Fred, from a clinical sense, and I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not an addiction specialist, I'm not a doctor. Just talking about some of the aspects of the hobby that I've seen, people, anecdotally, kind of get challenged, within their own personal financial sets by going out and buying art like crazy. And there's always that aspect to any collecting hobby. So yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not an addiction specialist or know the clinical definition of it, but I just want to echo, I think we understand the general idea.
Well, I think the other sort of parallel or interesting comparison there is that you start small, right? Kind of like with an addiction. So you start and you're like, oh, this is fun and this is cool and I'm having a good time. And then before you know it, it's like, I need more and more and more. And then you're, I'm buying pieces now that me 10 years ago would have been like, there's no way you'll ever afford those pieces. But now I'm doing it regularly. And now, of course, there's the like economic components and, whatever you're growing. I'm in my prime earning years and all those things to think about too. But even if I were to like scale it, I'm still buying way, way more expensive pieces than I ever did before. So yeah, to get the the rush or, whatever you want to say, you're spending more and spending more and spending more, and you're spending more time as well. So there's a good parallel there.
I think I've heard the good definition for addiction is when you give up everything for one thing, and the recovery is when you give up that one thing for everything. And Dino mentioned in the comments, and Chris just mentioned about time, and I want to get to that in a second, talking about the time addiction, which for me I think is the bigger problem right now in this hobby. I'll tell you what you asked, what makes this hobby different from other hobbies. I grew up with a group of guys who played a lot of poker. I mean, back in the 90s, before it was super popular, and about 4 of them made it really famous, like ESPN, World Series, all that stuff, and made it really rich. And the other 30 of us, me included, did not. We were not as successful. But I knew I was a loser because I was losing money. I mean, I'd win sometimes, I'd lose sometimes, but overall, I was losing money. So I knew that addiction was no good for me. And it was an addiction for sure. It was a lot of hours. When I collected too many statues, I mean, I looked like a hoarder. My room was just full. There's boxes in the basement, boxes in the attic, statues everywhere. It was very apparent the minute you open your eyes that you have a problem. I think that with the comic art, that problem is disguised because it's so fileable. You could put so many pieces in one little portfolio. You could have 10 portfolios, and that's a ton of art. But to someone else, it doesn't look so bad. It's like one little neat pile. And insofar as the money aspect, I think we trick ourselves because, at least for the last bunch of years I've been collecting, and probably you guys also, the market's headed straight up every year. So even though we're talking, Chris, and it's true, me too, like years ago, I wouldn't spend $2,000. Now it's $20,000, but I love it. I'll make it work somehow. We've slippery sloped our way to this crazy addiction. On the other hand, we have this little voice that tells us, but we're just buying stock. There's something wrong with buying stock that's going up. I mean, I could sell it. I have sold it. I've made profit on most of the pieces I've sold. I'm not doing anything wrong financially because my money's still there. It's just being stored in this paper. So I feel like right now, art hobby in specific, we cannot see the problem so easily until you get to the time aspect. I think that's a big one. That's when I said giving up everything for one thing. I definitely spend hours looking online, looking on my phone, looking for that next piece that I probably could have spent more with my children and my wife. I'm not saying I don't spend tons of time with them, but come on, how many times have you been at a family barbecue or this or that, or watching a movie with your kids and you're looking for that next piece? And I think for me, that's the biggest aspect I had to figure out. Like you said, James, and by the way, your new piece is beautiful. You showed it to me. It's gorgeous. Congratulations. But I'm the same thing. About 4 months ago, I spent the most I've ever spent. It was a huge leap for me. That same night after the auction was over, I was looking for the next piece. And it wasn't just money. I'm not worried about money because I'll sell that piece if I want to, and I'll get all my money back or most of my money back. It's time. I'm just spending so many hours looking for the next thing. I know it's a rush. I'm just nervous. Life is passing me by while I'm sitting here collecting, men in tights on paper, so the time you'll never get back. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
Well, 2 things to kind of piggyback on that. You mentioned the poker and stuff. I love the social aspect of this hobby. Absolutely, I've dove right in. Facebook, Instagram, chatting, videos, and everything like this. And so a lot of discussions with a lot of collectors happen, and we talk about art, we talk about prices, we talk about auctions. And one of the things that I see that again could potentially get people in trouble is you start getting desensitized to pricing, where when it starts becoming a game. You mentioned poker, right? And so I relate it to poker chips, right? When you have stacks of poker chips and you're throwing poker chips on the table, this art was 5K, this art was 500, this art was 10K. And but on the poker game, you're throwing out $500 chips, 1,000 chips, etc. Because the whole value of money shifts for some people, myself included, within the hobby. So one kind of mind trick that I do before I buy anything, and does it help? Sometimes, but I actually say that price out loud in the longest way possible. So if it's a piece that's $12,000, I'm like, instead of saying, hey, 12K or something like that, I tell myself, this is $12,000.00. I might even write it down on a piece of paper,
and then
just so I make right. But just so I can make some type of mental association of this is a real, monetary value that's kind of flowing through. But
well, there's no clocks in a casino, right? There's no clocks. They don't want you to know about the time. And
No windows.
Right? No windows. You don't want you to know it's daytime, it's nighttime. You've been here all night. And the chips are plastic. You don't think of them like money when you throw them in. So yeah, it's like I said, as long as the market's keeping stable or going up, we're spending money we can't afford sometimes, or some people are. I am, sometimes. But on the other hand, it's not like it's worth nothing. You still can get your money out whenever you want. I've done it, but the time aspect is scary.
So again, it's fuzzy, but if this thing is kind of an addiction or obsession, does that make Bill like El Chapo?
That's why I was keeping my mouth shut. I had a lot of guilt sitting here, and then I'm thinking
Friends
about
of Bill Cox.
You're destroying lives.
And then then I'm doing dueling dealers not once but twice in a week, or sometimes 3 times. I mean, I feel terrible right now. So, but at least
let me ask if has anyone's spouse or significant other said anything to them that, hey, you're spending a lot of time on your phone lately, or you're getting a lot of packages lately?
No, I have a wife who is I have a wife with a horrible shopping habit. I know that's a stereotype and a negative one, but it's 110% true in our house. And so the number of packages that show up, mine are a drop in the bucket. If I get a piece of art every 3 weeks or something like that, I can rest assured that there's a 3 or 4 10-to-1 ratio of packages at the door that are for her.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty open and honest about what we spend in the hobby. I keep tracking of what we spend, and she has access to the same spreadsheet. So, I mean, for better or worse, man, if she ever decides to leave me, she's gonna take me to the damn cleaners over it. But at least she knows what we're spending on it.
Aranga's got it figured out. Can you put his comment up, Bill?
As long as the maximum is $50, right? Or you tell her they're only $50.
I mean, it's just pieces of paper. How much can they really be?
Seriously.
Right. But I'll be honest. As a collector, I've never been that. I mean, I've been into it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I look all the time too, but I don't feel like I'm addicted. I guess because I've gone through periods where I wasn't buying, but I like to look, and even today, even though I put up all the updates I have in the last couple of days. I mean, a lot of that art, more than half of it, some of it I had for 10 years. I just never took the time to scan it. So I guess I've never felt like I'm addicted. So
Bill, I thought you were going to say you didn't spend a lot of time, and I was going to be like,
oh no, I spend a lot of time, but I
created calf.
Right. I mean, I can say that I spend. See, when you guys are saying that, I'm thinking to myself that I never stop working all day from the time I wake up to the time I sit. I go to bed. I don't spend time with my kids, even though they're in the other room. So I know the addiction. I know the drive to just always be looking or doing something that you're passionate about. But I was thinking of it in those terms because as an art collector, I feel like I've got that part under control. When I know when I should be buying and when I shouldn't be buying, but I haven't got the work part under control, which is just as bad. So, but I get it.
You did what Fisch was talking about earlier, where he said when you chuck everything and focus on one thing, or you chuck the one thing and focus on everything. You did that.
Mm-hmm.
When you bought your golf course, you got rid of all of it to do one thing, or to focus on the other stuff.
Yeah, the right. We're not going to go there, but yes, exactly. That is true though. So that's all. I think that's I've never had. I love the hobby so much, but as a buyer, I've always kind of been on the edge of it, because even though I acquire a lot of stuff that I acquired even early on was, in doing the dealer sites, like I took trade for that. So I was able to build up my collection without spending cash. And so even when I sold a lot of it, it didn't hurt as bad. But I guess that's the difference, because as a buyer, if I had to say where am I at is like the most cash I've ever spent on something, I feel like I'm still in a safe spot. I'm in the Oranga, his level kind of spot versus versus where I know other collectors can be. I mean, I get it though, James. You get that big piece, and then you're looking right, the next day.
Didn't even get it yet, James. You're a sicko.
It's got to go to Canada. No, but again, I mean, we're all, we have the collecting gene. We're all collectors. We're going to obsess a little bit, right? The amount of resources necessary in the hobby for a lot of people are significant, but it's just something to keep it in mind. If you start feeling that there's some negative consequences, or start feeling that, you got a lot of peers and friends within the hobby, and I don't know, maybe they can't stage an intervention. I'll put an appointment on your calendar next week, Mikhail, but if it's just overall, I just want to kind of bring it up as a topic, because, I found myself having to check myself constantly when it comes to time investment, resource investment, and just making sure that this doesn't turn into anything negative. And I don't think I'm even, anywhere close. Maybe that's, the first stage is denial, but it is something I've thought about as those checks get writ and those funds are drafted out of the bank account and those posts are there. And then I turn around and look for that next acquisition. So that's kind of where I wanted to take the topic.
All right. Well, that was a good topic. Very good. Thank you, James. And Fish, you get to do the artwork first.
Oh, wow.
If you don't mind. All right. So let's.
Jason, I do have a DPS addiction. I will admit that straight up.
If you could do the Spiegelman one first, Bill, that'd be good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So it's interesting. We were just talking about art addiction. When we get to my topic a little bit later, we'll tie in a little bit. But, when people see the art, they come into my office, they see the art. A lot of them don't get it. Like I said, they think, I'm collecting silly superhero stuff, which I guess they're right. That is the truth. But for me, the art is really tied up in the nostalgia and the meaning. And, there could be a beautiful piece of art, but if it's something that like more modern that I've never read or stuff like that, it means nothing to me. And if I just want to see nice art, I live near New York City. I can go to the Met at the moment. I can go to a lot of museums and see nicer art, even. I should say nicer. I don't know if it'll piss people off, but nicer art than the comic art. So for me, it's in the meaning. And this specific piece on CAF, this piece by Art Spiegelman, it's not this piece in particular that I really want to draw attention to. It's the book it comes from, Mouse, which was individual comics and collated into a graphic novel. A few years ago, we had a Hanukkah party. My family, Jews, Hanukkah party. So we do like a Hanukkah Harry, which is like a secret Santa. And I have a brother-in-law who's way older than me. He's a scientist. He's a very serious guy. And I got him, and it was like, you're supposed to spend $20 or $30. And I bought him Mouse. I bought him the graphic novel. And he was shocked when he opened it up. He's like, I've never read a comic book in my life. And I said, just read this. Just take my word for it. I'm putting my credit on the line. Just read it. He read it. He loved it. And the whole family loved it. Now, it's about the Holocaust. So obviously, being Jewish is Italian. But I've had a lot of non-Jewish friends. I'm like, I'm going to buy it for you. I'm going to buy it on your Amazon. Just when it gets to you, read it. It won the Pulitzer, right? It won the Pulitzer Prize, which, how many comics win the Pulitzer Prize? I think one. It's just amazing. So this particular, I was looking, I know the Art Spiegelman art is in the museum. It's not on CAF, but this was something he did for someone on CAF, for Rob. So I wanted to draw attention to this. And just, obviously the art is nice, but when I look at this art, it's not necessarily nicer than a Jim Lee page, but it's different. You look at this and you think of the book. You think of the meaning behind that book and the feelings you had when you read it. And it's just, that's what the art is for me. So I didn't want to draw so much attention to the technical details. I figure today Chris is here for that. I want to draw attention to just the meaning behind the art. And if you look at this and if you read Mouse, and if you haven't, really putting myself on the line. Read Mouse. You won't regret it. It's an eye-opening story. Yeah, so I look at this piece and I think of that.
Great selection. And here is your other one.
So here we go to a modern piece, which is funny. I actually stopped reading comic books in around 94. I was sent off to boarding school, and that was it. That was that. And then I never really went back to read comic books. So when I was in my 30s, a couple of people, my friends of mine still read comics. I said to them, all right, what would you suggest? What should I read now? So I got the suggestions that you'd figure. I got like, again, graphic novels are not really called graphic novels. I talked about last week. A graphic novel really should be a brand new story. But, comics that were put together into a trade paperback. And I got like read World War Hulk, read a few. One of them was read Old Man Logan. And this is the scene from Old Man Logan after, spoiler alert, where Wolverine is tricked into killing the X-Men by Mysterio, where Mysterio makes them look like the bad guys and he kills them. So it wasn't this particular piece of art. It was just, this is a DPS from Old Man Logan. And, reading it, after I stopped reading comics when I was about 14 years old, after it being so big for 5, 6, 7 years of my life, it was like so much a big part of my life. And then not reading comics for 20 years, 25 years and coming back to it, this is kind of what I felt like. Like you read somewhere where the kids have those Tamagotchis, those little electronic watches where you have to keep your pet alive. And you see a comment every once in a while on Reddit like, oh, I wonder how my pet's doing. I haven't logged on in 20 years. Is it still alive? So this is how it kind of felt like as a little bit more close to middle age, going back and looking at my old friends, my superheroes, and not having visited them in 20 years. And how are they doing, So like Old Man Logan was a story where, it's way in the future. And he's going through and the landscape is barren and the superheroes that we know are dead or old or Wolverine doesn't have his healing factor anymore, losing their powers. So I really felt like that was me revisiting my childhood. It was gone. It was dead. My back hurts in the morning. My healing factor is gone. So yeah, looking at this, looking at that blank look in Psylocke's eyes over there, I'm like, oh, sorry, I haven't visited you in 20 years. Obviously, the art itself is beautiful, but again, I guess I wanted to pick both pieces more based on the feeling than the art itself. Obviously we collect the art, but for me, when I collect art, it's because of what it makes me feel when I look at it, not necessarily because it's the best art. Some of my art is great, some of my art maybe is not so great, but to me, it might be worth more. Again, if I wanted the best art, I guess that's why people collect Frazetta, for being technically excellent. But I saw Frazetta live a couple of weeks ago at the Society. It was beautiful, but it doesn't do anything for me because I have no attachments to it. But these stories, I have attachments to, and I guess I just want to draw attention to that.
That's awesome, man. I will say, I think one of the hardest things to collect are basically oh damn moments within a comic book. Famous oh shit moments, and you can get collectors, you can get splashes. That's definitely one of them, and that's something where like Wolverine losing his adamantium or something where if you have that piece. It kind of trumps just about everything that comes close to that definition of rails for a lot of people.
Yeah,
moments. Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm just looking at that piece on CAF, and George H. was the first person to comment on it back in 2009. So George, he's been active in the community for a very long time, even one of our panelists here.
Sorry, Tamagotchi, not Tamaguchi, my bad. I never had one. I couldn't afford one back then.
You would have killed them all.
Probably.
All right, so we're going to switch gears and we're going to switch over to Chris, but I am going to kick off a little poll. Duke gave me a bunch of poll suggestions to pitch during the show, so I'll do a couple today, and I'll put the first one out there for everyone right now. It's a question of freshness to the market, and would you pay more for art that is fresh to the market? Inquiring minds want to know. So I've kicked that out there, and Chris, you can start us off.
All right, so I'm going to continue tonight with what I started 2 weekends ago, which is talking about these core principles of art. So if I look back at the last session, we talked about shape. So shape is being one of those core elements. So the element that I'm going to talk about tonight is sort of built off of shape, and that's form. And so form often refers to 3D art when you're talking about just art in general. But in illustration, it's sort of the illusion of dimensionality. So drawing the sides on a square and turning it into a cube, or turning a circle into a sphere, for example. So Bill, if you put up that first piece,
All right, and
So when you extrapolate shapes out into geometric forms, like you can see all these buildings in the background, or more organic forms like Batman's cape, we can see that these forms take up space. So form is also very closely related to the concept of space in art. But we can also see in this illustration, which is a banger, when you take items like form and value and then you put in technical tools like perspective, it really aces an illustration. So Alvaro Martinez Bueno is, in my opinion, a master. And one of the reasons that he's a master is his use of form. So that's all about form. So the next element I'm going to talk about is space. So Bill, if you want to put up the next illustration. So space is the distances or areas that are around, between, or even within the components of a given piece. So often we talk about positive and negative space in a composition, and positive is the area which is taken up by the subjects, so Batman or Commissioner Gordon in this case. And then negative space is the stuff that's going on around them that's not taken up by the subjects. So space is really one of the most important tools to comic book illustration, because you're working with not only space within the concept of the figures, but you're working with space in the concept of the panels and as well as the overall page. So effective use of space is also a really terrific tool that pushes the eye around the page. So if you want to put emphasis where the writer and the artist want it, positive and negative space is a great way to do this. So I can't think of anybody who's better at this, with the possible exception of like Sin City era Frank Miller, than Eduardo Rizzo, which is why I picked this page from Batman Grim Knight. All right, and the last concept I'm going to talk about tonight is texture. So when you talk about texture, we're really talking about how something feels, right? But in illustration, we can't touch the stuff that we're looking at. So artists have to use techniques like dry brushing or hatching, or, you can see a myriad of techniques in this piece. But what they're trying to do is make us understand what those objects feel like by what they look like. And that's trickier than it seems. When you look at this piece from Daniel Warren Johnson, you're going to see, try and count the textures. There's plastic bags, there's cloth, there's glass, there's brick. We all love bricks. There's asphalt, there's metal. And when you look at these different objects, try and imagine this piece without these techniques applied, right? Yeah, you could tell that like patchwork of whatever it is there might be bricks, and that the metal garage door next to it could be a metal garage door. But obviously Daniel Warren Johnson's ability to apply these inking techniques and the zipatone and everything really lets us know what these items are without being able to touch them. And that's all I got. Anybody have any questions or comments? Fish, you probably got some comments.
I just every week I see, not just you, but from other people, all the Batman capes. Everyone's showing the capes, and I wonder, like in Watchmen, they said that the superheroes used to use capes, and then one got caught in the doorway, and then he got killed, and then no more capes. What would everyone talk about if Batman stopped wearing capes?
The ears, I think.
Yeah, you couldn't get through too many doorways with those.
I have a brother who's a Batman fan, and that's all he keys in on is the height and like pointiness of the ears. Like the shorter, the better. So like Miller Batman, that's his jam. So there's one element that I left out of the discussion, which is color. And I left color out for a bunch of different reasons. One is that we don't look at a lot of color in comic original art. We can certainly in illustrations and color guides and things like that, but the other reason is color is so expansive. You can spend a semester on it pretty easily. So in these like little 2-minute blurbs that I'm doing, I can't even really touch on the concept of color, unfortunately.
So Mikhail, growing up, didn't you have some art training, formal art training, or involved in creation of art? In not at all. Okay.
No, I mean, my mother and brother are talented artists, and I studied art history a little bit in school. But I think, I mean, when I saw Chris's second piece, the last piece to define the texture, Daniel Warren Johnson's piece, that was one of the pieces I almost chose as my piece to highlight this week. And I think it's worth looking at that piece to explore why it's so compelling, and also to imagine that when the commissioner received it at first, it would be perfectly understandable to almost be surprised and disappointed at your very first glance of it, because it seems so mundane and your eyes working to absorb it. But my God, once you look at that piece and you start to dig into it, the awning on the umbrella particularly, I mean, all the little details that he put in there to make the spaces pop in and out and to give you a flavor for that street. I mean, you have to love it, I think. And so these are some of the tools that I look for. But I think your eye, most people's eye will recognize these tools done well. I think what Chris is helping us do is to give it a name and to look at it a little bit more critically if we're so inclined.
Not even necessarily critically in my mind. Criticism is a huge part of this, of course, but being able to your point, Mikhail, like to have the like verbal tool to say like, I like X or I like Y.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so getting back to your comments about the Spider-Man piece, it's funny you say that because I had the exact same sort of initial reaction to, you guys have probably seen this because I know you're Daniel Warren Johnson fans, as am I. But he did that piece where it's Luke dueling Vader on Bespin, and they're really tiny, and then like the entire composition is taken up by the like tower that the air cooling tower or whatever that they're fighting in. And when I first saw it, I thought, ooh, I bet that guy's pissed. And then I kept looking at it and I was like, this is mind blowing. It's genius. But that my first reaction was, ooh, you know, really? That's what he did? And then just the fact
that guy paid
Luke and Vader is mind boggling.
But
that's yours?
Yeah, that's mine.
Are you pissed?
No, but I will say when I first saw it, I took a second to absorb it.
Yeah.
I was like, what? And then I looked at it and I was like, wow. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. There's nothing to be ashamed about saying that. That's when you look at Daniel Warren Johnson's pieces, and when you look at the Spider-Man in particular, he is so fearless in executing his vision that he just goes for it. And he has the technical background to back it up as well. And he has the work ethic to back it up as well. The piece that Iranga has, I believe is it Iranga's or Kavi's, with the Galactus reaching out at the jet. It's so stunning. And to even think about putting Galactus in with a jet instead of like a planet or a spaceship or something, you know, to meld those sensibilities is something that he just works constantly at. And he bangs out these commissions, quite a few every list, and each one is a stunner. He really just has a great vision.
I think that's really, I guess, what you're saying about your piece, which I didn't know was your piece, but I had the exact same reaction. Like I had a second where I was like, what? And then the more I looked at it, the more I was like absolutely enthralled by it. That's an incredible.
And when I look at that piece, it's a 9x12 piece. You can tell that it's Vader and Luke get in super close, and there's little details that must be a micron pen length in width that are working very, very effectively. So every mark is serving a purpose. And that just adds to the magic of it for me.
Absolutely.
And then he still has such a loose style. You know, it seems very flowing.
He keeps threatening to do a perspective tutorial on his YouTube channel, and I'm there for it. I have to see it because
he puts those lines down.
I think of anybody who does it better. So at first, I actually wanted to do Daniel Warren Johnson for form because I was like, well, who does perspective better than Daniel Warren Johnson? And then I'm like shopping around CAF, kind of looking for examples for my talk, and I saw the Spider-Man piece, and I was like, no, that's texture. Like that's got to be. And so then I had to find something else. But yeah, he's nuts.
Well, let me ask this. From a category standpoint, I'm almost totally a nostalgic collector, right? Though I look at splashes and covers, and something that's looks badass, I can recognize something that looks badass. So do you think when people go through more formalized training, you mentioned art history, or you mentioned, Chris, looking at lines, texture, shapes, etc. Do you think that has an aspect on how they collect within the hobby? Do you think that starts changing what they look for?
It did for me. It does for me.
Okay.
I mean, I can't speak for anyone else.
How did it change it?
I think so. Mikhail kind of alluded to this a minute ago, but you recognize the things that you appreciate or understand or love about somebody's technique, and then those become your favorite artists, right? And I think I said the last time I was on here, like for me, it was Mike Zack, and then it was Jim Lee, and I think like I could pick apart like what I love about them, but at the end of the day, like I'm a huge fan of draftsmanship, and so like somebody like Trad Moore, who's just like executing draftsmanship at like an insanely like almost unprecedented level. I don't love Trad's art, and I'm just being honest. Sorry again, Mikhail, but I don't love Trad's art. But his draftsmanship, there's no one else working in comics that can hold his jack. Seriously, it's his draftsmanship is bananas. So that alone, I would buy a Trad Moore piece just for his technical aptitude as a draftsman. And
you see now he holds his tools too, right?
James, I don't collect for nostalgia at all, really at all. I look, artists that I liked when I was a kid, I still like, so I kind of don't count that. But I'm not out like hunting for, All-Star Squadron pages or Brave and the Bold pages or stuff that I was reading when I grew up. I'm just not.
And James, having a little bit of a vocabulary also just helps you defend your choices in public. Not defend, but to expound upon them. So if somebody says, hey, what do you like nowadays? And you point to someone who may not be well known, you can say, I like this about this, I like this about that. And it helps you just have a conversation with someone else and to maybe sway them or bring them around to your point of view.
Well, you guys are going to actually see that in real time, because when you bring up the art pieces that are, that I picked for the week, and it's not my turn yet. I mean, I'm not going to be able to dive into them like Chris and you and some of the other collectors on there, because again, I don't have the, I know why I like it. I know why it makes sense to me outside of, nostalgic aspect. But like you were mentioning, I don't have any type of formalized background or training to be able to articulate specifically of, why I'm attracted to that given piece. So, maybe it's a self-help and education side as I want to involve in the hobby, or people out there want to involve in the hobby. Maybe we'll get some suggestions in future shows on, how to tackle a little bit of, I guess, technical art education, just from personal enrichment.
And looping back to the first topic, fancy words help you get away with bigger expenditures.
Yeah.
Wow. I never thought of it like that, but you're absolutely right, Mikhail.
James, ironically, your descriptions of your art when you show them was one of the reasons that I thought about doing this in the first place.
Mikhail, I don't know where you find women, but
thank you.
Well, James comes up and you collect by heart, right? Which is respect, absolutely, and a lot of people do, which I totally appreciate. And sometimes you see something, you have like a gut reaction, you're like, oh my God, I gotta have that. But watching you talk about your pieces and you're like, oh, this is awesome, this is cool, whatever. I was like, I wonder if people would get into learning more about why they like what they like. So that was my idea.
Well, when we pull up mine, I'm just gonna faint on the first one and you guys can fill in the blanks. All right.
Mikhail, you were saying how the fancy words help you with justifying it to your spouse or whomever. Can't imagine my wife coming in here and saying, "How much did you spend?" And I say, "Honey, look at this cross hatching. Look at the cross hatching."
Yeah.
No, my wife.
I was like, tattoo it on your forehead.
Yeah.
You have to play 6 degrees of separation and kind of link the artist. The gallery had this artist who's now, exhibiting at, Art Basel in Miami, and it's all great, honey. It's an investment.
Or just go all emo. Just go all emo, Fish, and be like, "Oh, you'll never understand composition," and then storm out.
That is not the way we end arguments here in my house. But before we move on to the next up, I would say, Mikhail, I thought the same thing about that same piece. I was like, oh my gosh, this person's got to be disappointed. The first time I saw it, and like both of you and Chris, I had the same revelation. 10 seconds into looking at it, I was like, oh wow, there's so much more to this than that first blush. So I just wanted to admit that I felt the same way. And the worrisome thing would be for something like that is that someone who didn't take the extra 15 or 20 seconds to figure it out. They just looked at it and said, that guy probably is really angry that that's the commission that he got, and didn't look any further than that. So spend time on the art.
You got to buy it. It was fantastic when I first saw it.
Well, and to be fair, my brother, who actually finished his art degree, took a look at it and was like, "Oh my God, did you see this Daniel Warren Johnson dual page or commission today?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then we, kind of like worked through it, and he was like immediately just like overwhelmed by it. He loved it at first glance. So
I would say that to circle around like later in the show, see if you can find it and bring it up, Bill.
I will. I made a note to bring it up in a little bit. And but Mikhail, you get to actually talk about the art. But Chris, thank you again. Fantastic. If there's a third part to this, you're more than welcome to come back and talk about that, or any topic that you'd like to. No, our pleasure. All right, so Mikhail here. Let's go with this one right here.
So this is Batman.
You can tell by the cape.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Moon Knight. It's trading card art from 2019. The gallery of Johnny McCluskey, and who has also a companion piece of Logan, which is also fantastic. And the artist is Eric M. Gist. And I saw this in the last week or so, and I think if we talk about form and how the light has been used to define the form, and the way that the painters use black all around to really bring the light out, I thought it was just really stunning. It just really stood out immediately, and I immediately looked out for this artist. And then Bill sent in his updates the Swamp Thing piece of his that's just finished auction today.
Yep.
But I think this piece and the companion piece in Johnny's gallery are really fantastic, and I think the blue really stands out, and the coloring is all just really in touch with who the character is. I thought it was fantastic. Just wanted to highlight it.
Textures in this one, so I can be taught. Like the different textures on the cape, you can tell the pants are different material.
You can see it.
Whatever shirt he's wearing is super thin cooling fabric. That's obvious.
Yeah, Gist is an amazing artist. Let's see, like 2 years ago when I was at IX, I was set up in a booth beside him, and we talked a lot. I mean, and he was just starting these series of trading card art, and it was phenomenal to see the pieces in person. So he came from a more of a sci-fi fantasy kind of background with the art, the commercial work that he was doing. But I thought he was such a great choice for this series of card art.
I think the textures are.
Sure. Sorry, Mikhail.
No, I was just saying the texture is exactly what James was saying, is they come out so strong, and your eye looks at the cape on the inside versus the cape on the outside, and the fabric over his face. Really just a fun piece, and it must be a sight in person, I'm sure.
If you even look at the angle where he made on the crescent, where he made those parts shine, the belt shines on the same angle where the light's hitting it. A lot of detail.
Good piece. And this one we've seen a few times before, I think on someone's avatar.
Right. So this is Kavi's a commission piece from Mike Perkins. And when Chris was talking about negative space, this piece really, I thought I would mention it again when we looked at this, because first of all, you've taken a character like Professor X, who's very difficult to make dynamic. And he's done it really well. You know who it is immediately from the subtle cues. You don't see the wheelchair or anything. You just see a bald fellow, but he's got the pin. So immediately, and then the way that he's chosen to display his power in use is a fantastic use of the negative space, and not defining the top of his head, just everything about it. I think Mike Perkins is really settling into a fantastic groove at the moment with his work on Swamp Thing and with his inks on his own pencils. And I thought this was just a really, really fun commission piece.
No.
I have a question about this piece. I have a couple of pieces like by Mignola or other artists where you could look at the marker on the bottom of the black, and some parts of the black you could see the white. And I always wonder, is that on purpose, or did the black just kind of like not come out as black there? And if they went over it one more time with the marker, that would go away, and they wanted that to go away. What do you think?
I've never felt like that's on purpose. And the reason I say that is because this is all ultimately, well, not in this particular case, but these guys are used to drawing for production. And in production, that will all read as black.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at my Mignola right now, and if he wanted to spend the extra 8 to 10 seconds to make those areas black, he could, but he didn't, and that's partially because he doesn't super care, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's supposed to look black to the eye. You're not really supposed to be focusing on the white parts.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And you're not the only person that I've ever heard say that either.
Good selections once again, Mikhail. And
before my runner-up for texture, Mikhail, has that Swamp Thing stuff he's doing it's next level. I think.
Oh, I mean, absolutely.
That, like, pantheon of like elite, like Toddleben, Bissett, like whatever Wrights and even Swamp Thing artists.
No, I've really been enjoying the run, the writing and the art on this run right now. So,
how do we do in our poll, Bill?
I was just going to say, before we move on to topic 3, the question of would you pay more for fresh to the market comic art? The majority, 46%, said they didn't care either way, but 18% said they would pay more for fresh to market art. So, and there were 50 people who responded to that. So that's a decent number of people.
I was in the don't care crowd.
You were in the don't care?
Don't care.
Well, I saw an early comment from Marcus where he said, he wonders if it's the 20% or the 18% that say they would that are the people who are overpaying or are willing to overpay, today. You never know. I mean, I know that was a tongue-in-cheek comment from Marcus, but at the same time, that might be representative of the way that the hobby and people with money.
Maybe they're holding stuff back to sell later.
That may be true too.
Can I just say, people? Sorry, go ahead, James.
Oh, go ahead, Fish.
Oh, sorry, Chris. People say they don't care, and we had a discussion, James. We had a discussion about this last week, right? One of our groups. People say they don't care, but I don't really believe it. And my proof in my mind is this: when someone buys a piece at auction, and then they change their mind on it, and they try and sell it the next week, like you see 2 weeks later a different auction, and it's back in that auction. It almost always sells for less. Like there are pieces that someone flips and a year later you see for more. It almost always sells for less because there's this perception that piece is no longer wanted. What is that? The art is the same art. The piece is the same piece. That perception is part of the fresh to market question. If you saw it sell 2 months ago and you're seeing it being sold again, you're like, oh, maybe there's something wrong with it. That right there is part of the fresh to market question. What do you mean? If this piece had come up for the first time, you would have wanted it. Now you don't. Why not? Because someone else doesn't want it anymore. Why should that matter to you? I think people care more than they think they care about this.
Well, yes, I think one other aspect to that is, me personally, if I see something that was just an auction and then, a month later or something is for sale, I don't want to be the sucker who bought from somebody who's flipped a piece of art. So I don't know if it's fresh to market, so to speak, but it depending on the timing of how quickly it recycled on the market. I mean, that's just me. It's the negative connotation associated. Now, I mean, depending on the piece, of course, right? You give me a DPS Wolverine claws out from the Q-Birds, I don't give a shit. But it's kind of like, do I spend the extra 10% where it's just because is it flipping? Do I want it, etc. But when I say when I don't care, I truly don't. But if I post a piece or acquire a piece that is fresh to market, I guess there's a little bit. There's a little bit more aspect of I don't know if it's happy or dopamine, whatever you want to say. Like, yeah, I like posting it slightly more than something, but I think when it comes to acquiring the actual piece, me personally, it's probably one of the lowest priority things.
You, Jason, and Eric in the comment, James just mentioned flipping. I'm definitely not talking about flipping, because the flipping, Jason, that you're talking about goes one of two directions. Someone either buys it like at a show, like at Terrificon, and then the masses didn't see it, and then puts it in an auction, and they're able to access the masses and sell it that way. Or you mentioned dealers. Dealers buy it at an auction where the masses see it, but then they have some private, maybe rich collectors who don't do auctions, and they peddle it to them directly. They call up some guy in Europe and say, I have this piece. The guy who never even watched the auction, he's too busy running his multi-million-dollar company. So that's the flipping. What I'm talking about is different. If you pay top dollar for something in Heritage, and 2 weeks later it's on Comic Link, you're not flipping it. You're not expecting to make any profit there. You're expecting to lose money. This is someone who changed their mind on a piece. I actually have a friend who bought a very expensive McFarlane piece, and then a few weeks later he sold it for 10,000 less. Same with a Starlin piece. And both times is because he found a better example from that artist. He has the money to pay for the better example. He doesn't care if he loses a few thousand. He just wants to move on from it. This isn't flipping. This is someone losing money. And knowing they're going to lose money, they just don't care. The point is, I'm not talking about flipping. I'm talking about, yes, there's one less bidder on the market, yourself. But even so, it's not like it went for the, I don't know. I think fresh to market plays more of a role in people's mind than they think it does. I don't mean fresh to market like brand new, but like if they just saw it recently, people are more chilled out on it. James, you said it yourself. You're like, it changes the way you feel.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think it can.
I actually benefited from this because I bought there's a piece in my cast that's only been there for a few weeks. But that Jim Chung OMAC DPS that I just picked up, I bought it cheaper than Jim originally sold it for directly. So, I mean, you can, if you don't care about it being fresh to market, I think you can benefit.
Definitely.
Right. For me, it's like a lot of those pieces that pop up that are fresh to market. It's not like people didn't know who had it or whatnot. It's just, it just hasn't been out and available for a long time. People have known where it is, and at least those in the know. So when I think of fresh to market on some of those buys, I still think when an impressive piece comes out that has been in a collection for 20 years, I think that piece is going to command that price, whether it came out 20 years later or if it came out a year later. But I know what you're saying, Fish. I do feel that when people haven't seen something in a while, and it does give them the perception they want to go for it, they'll spend a little more. They're a little more excited. It's like, it's not just that one less buyer is out there if they had to sell it 3 months from now. It's really that excitement, the hunt. It's not as thrilling the second time around if it's a close to the last time. And we're talking earlier, the hunt is part of the addiction to the hobby. And it's not much of a hunt if it's just presented to you a second time a month or two later.
It's also a feeling of it's been in a black hole collection for 20 years and now's your only time to get it. But if it pops up again 4 months later, you start to think, oh, I'll get it in 6 months when it pops up again. It changes the perception.
Sure.
Well, just in the nature of controversy, I think you're absolutely wrong, Fish, and your opinion is awful.
It's always a naysayer. Yeah. Oh boy! All right. So, and I screwed up, Chris. I should have brought you up to the top so you could have been like the center of attention there for a while. I'm terrible.
I love the art being up there more than my stupid face, anyway, Bill.
Well, no, that's all right. But let's see. So, Fish, you get to take us off on our third topic of the evening.
Okay. So, Bill, I was watching your show earlier this week, or actually it was last week already. I wasn't watching it live because I was trying to spend time with the family instead of doing art stuff. I saw that you brought up the thigh gap topic. Thank you. But you also brought up the topic that I'm going to talk about now, which is people who display replicas or photocopies of their artwork. And I saw you started discussing it. And right away when you mentioned it, someone in the comments was shocked that people do that. And you said, yes, people do that. So it's kind of foreign to some people, but it's definitely a discussion that's worth having, and something that's been on my mind a lot lately. A lot of collectors whose houses I've been to, including one recently who's got a beautiful collection. He had a beautiful wall, and I was looking at all these nice framed pieces. And I go, these are beautiful. He goes, oh, those are all photocopies. I felt almost cheated. I was like, oh, they're not beautiful. Like I could tell right away. I couldn't tell. But like the real ones weren't there, and there's a number of reasons someone might not display the real pieces. Just to do the obvious, obviously theft. We all saw that email going around last week where someone had 2 Frazettas stolen off their wall and a bunch of other pieces. I hope he had insurance, but even if you have insurance, it doesn't mean you want to lose what you have, especially if the value's gone up also and you haven't updated the value. But theft is a big one. If someone breaks in and they know what they're looking for, pieces on your wall is a pretty big risk. Maybe not so much if it's a $200 piece, but if it's a $2,000 or $20,000 or $200,000 piece, it's kind of hard to sleep at night knowing that's just sitting on your wall. You wouldn't hang that much cash from your wall, but that's pretty much what you're doing when it's art. Obviously there's the whole, was it Eric Larson who lost a lot of his art to fire? Fire is a big one also. There's, the damage of the elements. If you have a good frame with the good stuff, you shouldn't have too much air damage, but there's that also. But for me, the biggest thing about hanging fakes on my walls is that I love, and I don't necessarily have fakes on my walls, but I love to bring my art with me. I love it to be portable. I love to have a portfolio that I bring to shows, that I bring to the art meetups. I like to show my art. I like people to see it. I like to possibly trade or use it as partial trade for other people's art. And if it's on the wall in a frame, it's not so easy to keep saying, oh, I'll bring this piece, I'll bring that piece. So of course you have the few pieces that you love and you say, I'll put those on the wall. I'm never going to trade those. That makes sense. But other pieces that I'm not as in love with, I like to have them portable. So all of this is to say, these are all reasons to have maybe replicas on your wall. But back to the other side of it, I don't have replicas up. I'm thinking about it, but I don't have replicas up. I don't know. I feel like if I were going to put up photocopies, I should be a print collector. I could save a hell of a lot of money. I could put up the most beautiful art in the world. My wall could be full of art I can never afford. And what's the difference? What's the difference if they're fake? So this comes back to James' topic. This is why I asked you to have James' topic before mine of the art addiction. It's something I didn't want to say before because I wanted to lead up to it over here. One of the things when it came to statues that let me get rid of that addiction was when I had so many in storage. And I always had this idea in my head of having this great display room one day. And when I finally got my own house and I was able to put a display together, I realized, hey, I got 600 statues here or 200 statues. I could only display 40 of them. I made it the nicest I could, and the rest I sold. And it's just kind of the same with art. If you display what you have and you enjoy it, then you kind of realize that you have more than you need. I mean, what's the rest doing? It's sitting in a portfolio. So this also goes into addiction. What is this hobby? Is this hobby the enjoyment of the art or just the owning of the art, the having of it? Because having starts to get to a very ugly human personality type, right? Like a greed type thing. I just want to have it. I haven't looked at it in 2 years or more than for 2 seconds, but I just want to have it. So I don't really want to be that kind of collector. I want to enjoy what I have. I want to have it on my walls. I'm scared of all those things that I mentioned, the theft, the fire, all those things. Obviously insurance helps with that. And I really do like to have my art portable to go. On the other hand, I just feel like the minute I start putting replicas on my wall is the minute I save money and become a print collector instead, which I don't want to be. So I was curious what you guys think about that. Mikhail, you got those gorgeous pieces behind you. I mean, would you feel the same if those were photocopies? I don't even know if those are photocopies, but would you feel the same?
Marcus, don't worry. It's a reflection of a reflection. So it's not direct light on the frame. When I was shooting my memes for Dueling Dealers, I went to FedEx, and for 49 cents, they made me a copy of a piece that I chopped up in a paper cutter. That copy was very, very strange to hold in my hands because it was like they printed it onto Bristol. It felt just like the art. The copy quality, it was a Tradmore piece. The quality was fantastic. Sharp lines, every single line was, well placed and well printed. It was scary. I didn't like the feeling of it that, for 49 cents, I created this facsimile of this thing that was very good. If you come to my house, there's a bunch of walls that have light on them that don't have art. So that, and even with art glass and with all the hoo-ha, you don't want, like, I'll just never have a direct light hitting any of my pieces. It's just not worth it. So if you had a perfectly placed wall with a nice black and white piece that you wanted to put up there, but there's always something else that you can put up there, or, I have some acrylic pieces that I put up in places that can take a little bit more abuse from the light. So it's a very tricky question for me. I definitely started out in the vein that everything I buy is going to get framed and put up on the walls, and I really did keep that up for a very long time. I think in terms of having it and collecting it in books, it's just for me personally, it's why I really enjoy doing the full stories, because I've been having overlays made and binding them up and have them in a form that I pull out and look at all the time. So I consider even the pages in my books to be in active use. And part of, again, what I'll be talking about later is, why am I organizing my collection? It's so I can see my pieces faster and quicker. So, I mean, I have nothing against people who put up facsimiles, and I can see your valid points, but for me, it's just it's a non-starter. I never even thought about it.
On my end, my entire comic art collecting hobby started with wanting to put stuff on blank walls in a new house, right? Wanting to have the actual original art and everything on there. Now, as the hobby, my collection progressed in the hobby, and the value of pieces and everything, changed. I kind of get more and more concerned, and it's kind of topical and timely, where I'm actually thinking of doing some type of facsimile for the first time, just because the space that all my art is in, the only space left are walls that are light facing. So I'm going to put them up there, make the copies and everything associated, so I can have the art knowing I have it in the background. But I would probably default into having the actual original art hung. It's knowing that that's the actual art. You can kind of see some of the nuances and age and paper and everything that's not going to translate to a facsimile. But I also recognize that I don't want to potentially damage it, just to have that small thing of enjoyment. So we'll see how it goes. If I frame it and it gets up there and I'm like, it's just not the same thing, then I'll look to rearrange the room or something like that. But on the flip side, when I do frame a facsimile, it won't be museum glass or any of that stuff, right? So maybe I'll save some money. But one of the other points too is because I've done so much framing of my art, and most of the time when I frame a piece, I consider it a permanent part of my collection. To an extent, nothing is truly permanent. So I've sold a couple pieces that I considered framed and permanent, and there is that hassle associated with taking it to the framers and having it removed and everything along those lines. So you do lose that mobility aspect when you do start framing the pieces. But walking in that room, seeing everything, knowing that's the originals on the wall, enjoying that art every day, I think those positives outweigh anything associated with, being able to kind of move it around.
What do you think, Chris?
Bill, can you bring that comment up from Eric Wenger?
Yep.
That's the gist of that. That's kind of my only counterpoint to, like, why wouldn't you hang facsimiles? So I'm obviously, like, I'm into the act of creating the art and producing the art, and I like the blood, sweat, and tears, or whatever that went into making it. And so so my Daniel Warren Johnson commission has got Zipatone all over it, like a lot of them do, and you can actually see like where it's like thick in parts, because he's used multiple layers and things like that. So if you get right on top of the piece, you can definitely tell it's not a copy. And I don't know, that's important to me. I absolutely get why people do this. I have a recurring nightmare where my house is on fire and I have to decide to, what do I save? Like, do I throw the Travis Charest out the basement window, or, what do I do? But,
I thought you were going to say the wife or the art.
Yeah, the dog.
No, she's on her own. She's got too much. She can move. This stuff needs me to get it out of the house. No, so I absolutely understand why people do this, but it's just that it's a non-starter for me. I won't do it.
You'd be
And,
shocked how well texture translates to a really good copy. I'm telling you, I was right up on these pieces, and the yellow and the whiteout, they were all there. Now, if I felt it with my finger, I know the difference. But in a frame, you'd be shocked how well it looks, how good it looks. It's scary.
I'll believe you. I just the other thing is I respect the fact that you are, I don't know, brave or confident or whatever enough to take your art in a portfolio out of the house. Like that is the furthest thing from what I want to do with my collection. And it's not even really all that valuable. But I'm so like precious about that Itoya or those two Itoyas. Like the thought of taking them even to the framer like gives me anxiety, and it's one piece at a time.
I mean, here's the business opportunity for anyone out there: high-end interchangeable art frames. Just
take a piece out, put a piece in. Top loaders.
Like that, some archival something where you can easily, switch out art for those enterprising individuals.
And Dan made a good point in the comments about framing and displaying commissioned versus published pieces. I mean, that's a nice line that you can draw quite easily. The value tends to be lower, and the stored value tends to be lower. So it's a nice compromise.
I was thinking about that. I have one wall which has mostly like a bunch of pieces that are like 500 or less. Mostly commissions. I bought some off dueling dealers, stuff like that. I was thinking that's not a bad way to go, where you walk and you still have that nice feeling in the room, but you don't have as much risk. But then again, what are you doing with the other pieces? Are you sticking them in a book?
Right. Well, I was going to say, that's why I kind of look at and see what I actually have here. I know what I have in the rest of the house. I don't have any published artwork on any of my walls, at least from comics. I think, most of the work that is behind me is stuff I picked up from IX, so it's mostly science fiction, fantasy artists, just people I really like. But I think everything else that I have framed and on the walls, even in the other rooms in the house, are all commissions or convention sketches that I've gotten. I have a Powerpuff Girl cover that's framed. I framed it for my daughters, though, who didn't want it hanging in their room, so it's hanging in mine. But other than that, it's commission, 2 convention sketches, and then most of it on the back. So I guess I've never thought about it, but I've shied away from framing my published artwork.
I'm looking at the chat, and I won't do a bad Jeff Foxworthy impression, but to kind of bring it back, you may be an art addict if you go and grab your art off the shelves before you check on your wife and kids if there's a fire.
More than likely.
You may be an art addict. We'll do a top 10 list.
Well, and hey, just Fish, because you had mentioned that I had mentioned it. Did anybody mind that I kind of brought up our topics? Because I kind of thought that was a good thing. I didn't talk about the topics. I wanted people to know what our topics were going to be, because I've gotten other people saying that, I'm never updating the descriptions of the shows after the fact to list what the topics were. So it kind of makes it hard for people to decide whether they want to go back and watch them. So when I had everybody's topic on Thursday and I was doing the CAF update and to talk about the show, I thought, I'm going to mention what the topics are. And you're right, Fish, yours was the only topic that I brought up that people talked a little bit afterwards. Like, people really do that. So, but I thought it was at least a good way to bring it.
It's a great teaser.
You're right. I'm going to do it from now on. And I did actually update this description, I think, of tonight's show as proper as I've ever done it, where I've actually listed the topics and things. So I'm coming around to being a little bit more thorough on this, but okay. And I don't think I brought the thigh gap up. Somebody in the comments said something about thigh gap. And so I just followed suit with that because, well, I won't even go there, but
you did already.
There's got to be a dueling dealers meme that incorporates thigh gap. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, God.
Man.
No, I got to shy away from that. Because then those guys will want to bring thigh gap art, and that's not what I've had to turn them down on lots of stuff already.
Better than the romance stuff. I'll stop.
I'm going to have to change my name.
All right. So let's see. Artwork next is going to, well, Fish, thank you very much. As always, your topics are definitely different than we've had. And I love the fact that they do spark a lot of conversation. And this was one that, it's funny, has come up so often. And when talking with collectors, I was shocked the first time that I heard people doing that. I even liked, Dino had done a thing where he printed all of his favorite stuff, so he doesn't have to take it around. He puts them into these books, So when he goes to a show, rather than carrying the originals, he likes the fact that he's got something printed in something he can just open up, hand around, doesn't have to worry about how people's hands are dirty or anything like that. So I think there's a lot of different ways people look at sharing their collections with other people and even themselves. Although Dino, of course, has the best man art cave on the planet, so he's got to speak.
Well, when I met Dino, he brought one of the books that he printed of his published art. I mean, that was really a fantastic way to see the art. It's his own artist edition, basically. Really, he needs to come on and talk about that for sure.
My daughter was watching, Bill, when you had Dino on and he showed that video of his art cave. And my daughter doesn't know the difference between good art and not as good art. So she doesn't know his art's better than mine. So, but she looks to me, she goes, "Daddy, how come you don't have art on the ceiling?"
Game, Fish. The game. Got to compare yourself to the rock list.
Oh boy. All right. Well, James, you get to start us. Well, no, you're showing us your artwork this time. I'm sorry. So let me get your first piece on the screen here.
Oh, okay. We reverse order. We got that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, yep.
I mean, like I said, do I talk about lines, composition, texture, everything? Yeah, it's Galactus blowing up a planet. I think it just captures kind of the essence of Galactus. And I saw it. I didn't even realize he was blowing up a planet at first. And then, yeah, it was pretty cool. So if I'm going to articulate this, translate this for me, Chris, why is this piece good for me?
Who is this, James? I can't tell. I can see the signature.
Galactus.
No, that's
and it's in the collection of T-Shed. Oh, it's not Hulk. That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know, James. There's a lot going on here. I mean, the Kirby crackle, kind of throughout the background is nice, but it doesn't do much for the figure, if I'm being honest. It actually distracts a little bit from the figure. But the blast going down from his hand through the planet is a nice focal point, draws your eye to it. I don't know, to some extent, yeah, it's Galactus. It's awesome. You don't have to justify this to me.
I'm not, but I just wanted to borrow your book. It's on a note. It's a waste of good food. It's just, he likes it well done. I like my steaks medium rare, but looks like Galactus likes his planets well done. And the next one, this is my fainting piece. So this art's good. Now, I could kind of articulate a little bit on this one. Of course, you have Silver Surfer and Galactus. It's in my buddy Ryan Sherwood's collection. He's been on talk about a long cycle for a hunt. He's been trying to acquire those for a long time through a little bit of twists and turns. But Surfer versus Thanos, I think it just captured some absolute raw power. You can kind of feel the intensity and the hatred of these two foes. You can feel just the magnitude of the battle, absolutely, completely. You've got all the cosmic aspects and the meteors, everything in the background. Just energy, power, intensity, massiveness. It's a wraparound cover, right? So it's one of those, just art pieces it's an absolute showstopper. So I'm really happy for my buddy Ryan that he was able to actually bring this into his collection, make it I'm assuming a permanent home for a long time, and kind of jealous of him at the same time.
It's a gorgeous page. I always wonder how much power Thanos has without his gauntlet. I feel like every different Thanos book I read, it's a different amount. But what a beautiful battle.
For me personally, this is like the best piece that's been put on CAF in weeks. This is, man, like when I saw it, I like whistled out loud when he posted it.
That one planet or meteor in the middle looks completely like different texture-wise than everything else on the page. It almost looks more real, and the other ones in the top corner and the bottom corner look more comic-y.
Yeah.
It's kind of quiet time, man. You just sit and stare at it.
I think he kind of, I wonder if he did that to literally like push the look of it into the background because what's going on between those figures. but just, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And Claudio Castellini, possibly the nicest artist I've ever like encountered in person.
He's got I mean, just everything I've seen on Cat by him, like the big published double covers, they're just amazing. So, you know, we'll see. Put that on the list, but I know it's incredibly difficult to get those type of level pieces from him. So we'll see how it goes. But,
Well, there is a lot of Claudio's work on CAF too. So if you haven't ever, familiar with their work or not, you should definitely do a search, because beautiful, beautiful work.
Yeah, James, don't be an addict. Just enjoy Ryan's piece.
All right. So bringing us home is Mikhail. You're going to give us our fourth topic of the evening.
All right. We loosely call it organizing and cataloging a slightly larger collection. But really what I'm doing is kind of crowdsourcing the audience and you guys as to how this could be done better, or what should be added, and what are the advantages of tracking some of these statistics. So Bill, can you share my screen?
Yes.
All right, so this is a part of my spreadsheet, and I have taken out there's a price column that I've taken out just for shyness sake. But you can see we've got the name of the piece, the date purchased, which I use the date that it arrives in my hands, actually. The market, the artist or artists, date sold if necessary, the history tab, a photo, which portfolio it's in, which we'll get to in a bit, the year, and some notes. So, if you take and then why I like using a spreadsheet is it's searchable. So once you've got your information in, you can very easily a piece. So I wanted to use McFarlane piece as an example, because I only have the one, so it comes up very quickly, unlike the 40 that Scott has. And you can see, so I've got the name of the piece, the day I purchased it, where I got it, the artist, and then as I get data, I add it into the history. So the other day, Scott was on the show talking about this piece, and he let loose, some information. So I just added it into my spreadsheet. Again, it's not really something that you necessarily have to do, but I think, like Jordan likes to say, we're all caretakers of these pieces. So having a trackable chain of custody is really important. And I think being able to supply that to future buyers is important too. And in the notes, you might have, blue line, pencil, anything that you might want to add on to the piece. And then the other way I catalog it is I go to my photo app, which in Apple is really well organized because you can tag photographs with information. So I can take a piece and pull up the information. And you can see, I have the artist name, something that would describe it a little bit, the media, the subject matter. And that means that you can down the road search for all of this as well. So if I want to then search for pieces that have Wolverine in them, I can quickly get a sampling of some pages that I've logged. So this makes it very easy to enjoy your collection, to find a piece. And then the third thing that I do is that I've just started kind of working with is in this portfolio section, I have a number that corresponds to the portfolio that the piece is in. And I took some pictures of how my portfolios are laid out. And so you can if you get a label maker, you can create a label that says any kind of hints that you need, that what's in this portfolio. And by just taking a quick look at it, you'll know, okay, it's panel pages, it's covers, it's commissions, it's a complete issue. And then these are the little labels for the spines that tell me the designation of the portfolio. So I can look at my spreadsheet, and if I've logged a piece, find out where it is pretty quickly.
That's awesome.
I think
And
you
so-
should.
Yeah, this is the beginning of what I've been doing. I mean, my collection is nearing several hundred pieces, and I need to keep track of it because I look at it, all my pieces, a lot, and even this number of pieces, it's only even a dozen portfolios. I flip through all of them every month at least, if not more often, just because I keep them easy to access and I pull them down, look through them, enjoy them. But I was just wondering what other people are doing, what you've found works or doesn't work for you. And of course, the most important thing that I'm trying to do is to get newer collectors to start doing this right away. Even if your collection isn't going to get so large, it's extremely handy to know how much you paid for it, when you paid, where you got it from. All of that comes in handy, especially when you want to sell it down the road or insure it.
Well, I think the first thing that popped into my mind, and I say this with reservation because I'm going to throw it out to Bill, and I understand I just not putting work on your plate. This is none of that. But you implemented that CSV functionality within CAF, right? And that's been pretty awesome. Created into an Excel spreadsheet, and there's some hidden fields in there when you're managing your artwork. Price and date and all that kind of stuff. And I got to say this delicately. How about maybe putting the ability to create additional custom columns so that you can put some of the information like, Mikkel's looking for or something like that. And then it generates that CSV file. Because you have all, when you manage your artwork, you have all the fields. I don't know if there was a button or something like that to say create custom field. You can just title it, put whatever data point you in, and then you can export it to CSV. So you can do some of this tracking within the CAF tool. Not a programmer, but that's kind of my immediate reaction when I saw some of the stuff that Mikkel's doing.
Well, I mean, it would be complicated.
Okay.
And how often would it get used? I guess that's to me, I always look at that, how many people would go custom, or in the case of the CAF data, there is a free text field to pretty much write anything you want. So if you wanted to just write in character titles, like how Mikkel in the photo app was tagging things with Wolverine and that sort of thing, that you could use that as your means of doing it. I think I cover all the common types of things, but yeah, getting that dynamic, at least for where Maureen and I are at with it. Yeah, we could do it, but I would look at it and think that it probably wouldn't get used as often as I would like it to be used if I were to take the time to put into it.
And also, James, just no knock against CAF or anything like that, Bill, but I keep my data to myself, so starting on your own in your own spreadsheet is always going to give you more flexibility and privacy than having it on a third-party website. So Bill's functionality to export it, I think, is more geared towards the collectors that have been doing it for a long time and have very consistently been filling in their fields. But I think for younger collectors or people who are starting out now who haven't done it at all, the more secure option is to start your own website spreadsheet and have it in your own control.
So what was your impetus of creating something like this to begin with? It was just from an organizational standpoint. It was just a way to.
I think definitely as the numbers started creeping up, so in my master sheet, I've got the price thing and the price column, and at the end of the price column, there's a big old number that just automatically gets updated when I add something. The other thing is it gives you some discipline, because when a piece comes in, before I can even think about putting it into a portfolio, I have to tag it. I have to scan it, tag it, log it in the spreadsheet. That keeps me organized. So I know that everything, if it's in a portfolio, it's been put into the spreadsheet. So nothing's getting through the cracks. And the other interesting thing.
Sorry, you literally have a check-in process. You get a new piece, and then you do X, Y, and Z.
Bag and tag.
Exactly, like Robert Downey Jr. Buy it, store it.
The echo is back.
I was just going to say your echo is back.
I do not know.
I don't hear it.
No, I heard it too.
But
anyways, it seems to have gone now.
It is. It's gone now. Yep.
And in doing this, I also realized that the people who say that they look at their collections a lot on CAF, I'm really starting to wrap my head around that, because it really is, especially if you've taken nice quality scans of your work, it's the easiest way to access a larger collection, because the way your homepage is laid out with all the artists right there, it makes it super fast. And the ironic thing is, my phone screen is better than my computer screen. So when I'm scrolling through my collection on my phone, I'm seeing the best possible images of them other than in person. So, and it makes for a very solid situation. So one thing I asked Bill to do is also create a link to to a scanner that I've been using. It's an 11x17 scanner that's available on Amazon. And I think if you are spending, more than a couple $1,000s a year in this hobby, you're well invested to put $300 into a decent scanner. It's a little bit large, but it is networkable, so you can have it anywhere out of sight as long as it's Wi-Fi signal. And I've been really enjoying just rescanning my pieces, getting a good quality up on CAF, and having a good quality scan in my photo gallery.
Yep, I have the same scanner myself, and I did the exact same thing. After I got it, I rescanned everything that I had in my CAF gallery back to 2003. I mean, that was before I posted the new artwork. I rescanned everything I had out there, because I had stuff from back when I had an old Mustec and only was scanning things at 500 pixels tall and whatnot. So it was definitely worth it. They're big.
The other tip I wanted to give people who don't have a scanner or who don't want to get a big scanner is for your phone now, there's a Google Photo Snap app that is quite decent and does quite a good job, comparable to Cam Scanner, and there's no watermarking. So check that out if you are interested.
Yeah, Microsoft has Office Lens as well. I do have a quick question on scanning though. I mean, because I have again, the same workforce 11x17 scanner. And then I'm getting some artwork pieces in that are a lot larger, my 11x17. The DPSs you can fold over, but they're not fold overable. So I went to FedEx Kinko's and they're like, yeah, we can scan it, but it goes through rollers. I'm like, oh, hell no. So, I don't know. So where's a good place to get something scanned that's large, like poster size, etc., that anyone knows about it? I'd love to see it in the chat, or if you guys know anything in particular.
I go to a mom and pop shop and they have huge flatbed scanners, and I know them there. I use them for my business, and if I want them to scan something big, I trust them. They make sure that the screen is clean, and they scan it on a flatbed. They know better. No rulers.
James,
So
if you can find an architecture supply place close to you, they will often have like massive flatbed scanners or plotters. The other thing you can do is just scan it in pieces and stitch it.
No, but you can't close the top without bending the artwork. I've had that problem also. And if you even have the thing open, it might be too wide but not long enough. You might get a whole bunch of
Sure.
Yeah, and I've tried stitching stuff, and it always it has a little bit off, mostly due to my skill within Photoshop, and it just won't work for me. It's got to be perfect.
So, Mikhail, I think your data is amazing, and I think that probably not too many collectors have hundreds of pieces like you do. I mean, I probably have like 60 or 70, and I'm trying to cut it down to 50. I've met a number of people who have around the same. I've met a couple. I mean, I see Jason in the comments every once in a while who have hundreds, like you do. So I guess, the more you have, the more important it is to organize it. But I also think it also comes back, admit it or not, to James' topic, not necessarily an addiction. It might be a great thing, but we find more ways to busy ourselves with our hobby. At the end of the day, like, if I want to see my art, I could look at it in the book. I don't have as much as you do, or also I could spend more time cataloging, writing about it, making this about it, making that about it. It's no different than, reorganizing my statues on the shelves where they look better this way, which is good. It's a way of spending time with the hobby without spending more money on the hobby. Kind of scratches the itch a little bit. But again, I can't relate.
No, I absolutely agree. And I was thinking about that when I came up with this topic, and I wanted it to be a little bit more accessible. And I really do feel there are some tools here that even if you have 50 pieces, you should be applying. You should be scanning your pieces and tagging them and keeping track of the artists that are represented in your collection. And CAF does a great job of doing that too. But having a counterbalance to that's your own record is very useful. And even 50 pieces, the value of those starts to add up. You could have 50 pieces, worth 50 to 100,000 easily, especially nowadays, if it's an older collection, if you've been doing this for a while. And similarly, I really like what you said about spending time with the hobby without spending time on buying pieces. I've really been digging into CAF sub-galleries that you can create. And so I've been putting my whole issues into sub-galleries so that they're easier to kind of view, and they're all collected in one place. And I think that's why when James mentioned his topic, I felt the need to engage with it, because I have 600 pieces. What does that mean? A lot of them, and a couple hundred are from complete issues. So it's one thing, but another thing as well. But I like to think I'm engaged with my pieces. I really do look at them on a very regular basis. And I'm discovering things every time you look at them. And that's kind of the joy too, is that a piece you've had for 10 years, the more you learn about the hobby, every time you look at it, you'll see something different.
I think on a basic level, from an organizational standpoint, I think it is important to catalog at least acquisition costs or value costs once you start investing a lot of money in the hobby, just in case, right? I'm not saying, insurance purposes or, if you're gonna go all out, you're gonna use so much of your resources in the hobby, you should spend the time for some type of organization, at least just to capture what your investment is, because you just never know. Now, I like everything else, the images and the descriptions and the lineage and everything. I'm, thinking about stealing your spreadsheet if you let me. But I think it's important, again, just from a basic level, to catalog values so you can track yourself.
I would say that. I can tell you the first time we put the gallery report together, which was I think probably a year and a half or 2 years ago, I was surprised at the amount of money I had spent in the hobby, just, because I was actually always recording what I spent and what I thought the current value was on things. And so it is a good thing to go back and reflect on where you're at and what you have. And it's better to have it in some form of spreadsheet, and I agree with Marcus. Anything can be hacked. People are more happier to do it on their own, like Mikhail. that more power to each of you to do it on your own. But I thought, for me, it was eye-opening, because I always thought I didn't really have that big a collection until I actually saw the actual number along with the amount that I've spent over time. It was very good to digest that and appreciate how much money I've spent over the years.
I don't want to know.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss.
All right. Well, listen, we've, once again, Mikhail, great topic. And as you had mentioned, there was, we put a link in there to the workforce that you use. And Chris, you get to finish us off this evening with your art picks.
All right.
You're on the spot, right? You gotta get some vocabulary going.
I won't go nuts. So I learned today that today is Spider-Man Day via social media. So my first piece is a Spider-Man piece, which is just a coincidence, to be honest. So I'm highlighting this for a few different reasons. One is that it is in the gallery of my best friend Eric, and he just acquired this, and I scanned it for him. So Shout out to Eric. But more than that, I kind of wanted to show this because this is a commission, and it's 3 full 11 by 17 boards. So I think that as a person who collects a lot of commissions, I really like this piece because it highlights what you can get in a commission. If this were a published piece, to be frank, I shudder to think what it would cost. But just a tremendous balance across all three boards with the number of characters. Everybody still gets the spotlight, even poor Mysterio there in the middle getting his fishbowl crushed. But I really love the fact that, Sandman, so Joe Bennett is obviously the artist here, and this is all in pencil, but so Joe using some, shading technique on Sandman to really, get across that sandy texture. And then really Sandman taking up the majority of the left half of this entire composition is well balanced by the fact that he chucked 3 of the characters, tightly onto the right side. So in spite of the fact that there's a ton going on in this page, in this piece, it's really well balanced all the way from the left to the right. And we still get Spider-Man, dead square in the middle as the star. So probably, this is the last thing I'll say about this, my favorite thing about this entire piece is this Doc Ock's tentacle that cuts across all 3 pieces, because not only does it unify all 3 boards, but it's like a strike through element that really grabs your attention while at the same time putting the attention on Spider-Man. So just a terrific piece.
It's beautiful, it's stunning. I keep looking at it.
Yeah, and there's so much to look at. You can just pour over it.
And Eric has a huge scan in his calf gallery. So if you check out Eric's gallery, just be sure to check that piece, because on my ultra wide screen, it fills it pretty well. So it's amazing.
I wonder what scanner you used.
I used my scanner. It's a Brother. I can't remember the model number. I'm sorry, but it's an 11 by 17 flatbed.
Gotcha.
Mysterio's having a bad day.
Yeah, probably my favorite. Probably my favorite thing about it. Mysterio's so. God, I hate Mysterio.
Yeah, why is Shocker there instead of Craven? What was the choice there? Eric, did you choose that on purpose to have Shocker switched out instead of Craven?
I can tell you because, like I said, Eric's my best friend. He hates Craven and he loves Shocker. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
He gets major Freddie Mercury vibes from Craven.
And here is your other selection. This was a good one. Thank you.
Yeah. So where do I start with this? I love Dave Johnson so much. I love Nick Fury. But so I've spent my last 2 segments here talking about core principles of art. What I haven't talked about are any of the principles of design. And I think the thing that I love the most about Dave Johnson is that I feel like he's a designer first and he's an illustrator second. And I think you always know when you see a Dave Johnson cover on the stands because they are so incredibly well designed. Now the clear thing that jumps out at you here is that he knocked out the silhouette of the AK-47 that cuts through from left to right across the screen, or across the page. And then he also used that as a sort of narrative divider between the 2 scenes that we have going on. And that's just pure design. Those are just design choices that he made when he put this cover together. And I'm not sure that anybody does this better than he does. And there's little things that as a person who has studied design extensively, the top, there's nothing going on the top because he knows that there's trade dress and the title is going to go there. So it's just weird things like that he is so adept at doing. And then you start noticing little things like, okay, the Punisher skull is there in the trees, over top of the Punisher. I don't know. He's just a genius, and I feel like we see so much of his work. He's so prolific that it's easy to kind of like lose track of why he's so good. So I just kind of wanted to highlight this cover.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a Punisher skull.
Yeah, I didn't see the skull either. Now I see it.
But I might have missed it. What issue is this?
I didn't write it down. I apologize. It's
from
from Fury, My War Gone By, the N.S. Parlov book.
Yep, issue 8. And it's in a collection. The owner's name is AK.
Yeah, he's got
but yeah, very nice. And I would agree with you on Dave's work. Always well thought out.
And on the drink and draw, I think you really see his sensibility come out really nicely. He always does the logos, always incorporates the wording. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, he's a tremendous. You'll see him do the wording, titles, things like that. Like when he does, even his social media is like oddly like well designed. Like the stuff that he puts together for himself, like his little devil pig icon and stuff like that. He's just a tremendously talented designer. And I mean, I think you could. Well, I wouldn't argue. I think you could argue that like he's designer first and illustrator second. But I honestly, in comics, I see nothing wrong with that. I think it's an asset.
All right.
Very good.
Nice selections all around this evening, gentlemen. So, any parting thoughts? I didn't do a second poll because I thought we talked so much about that first one that it worked really well to have it in there, and the timing was kind of good too to start at the beginning of the second topic, finish it after the second round of art, and talk about it right in the middle of the show. I thought that worked out great.
I like the impromptu topic. That was nice.
Yeah, it was. So Duke sent me several, so we'll work something out into the next show as well.
And knowing Duke, he'll keep sending you more. I was wondering why the comments were so quiet, and I realized we're missing Duke, we're missing Ruben. So it's been like easygoing comments.
Ruben, I think will be on in the next week or two. So get your
I saw it. Wasn't he? Didn't you have him on the show for next week, or somebody put him on the show for next week?
Next week with Kavi. Kavi will be on.
Kavi.
Like being said, I mean, we still got a lot of slots for August. And we'll email Bill, and we'd love to get you guys on. There is a comic collector conversation alumni group that you get to graduate to, and kind of chat. So I'm not saying it's that privileged because it's not. But, so jump on the show, share your piece, right, and you get to get part of a very, very, very small elite. We just kind of talk.
We need to add Chris to that group.
We do, but I can't find you on Facebook, Chris. Are you an anti-Facebook?
Well, then you can't be in the elite group then.
Smart man.
Yeah, right.
Never got on there. There's no reason to now.
No.
I thought it was a dating app for the
It
first
is.
couple of years of Facebook. I thought it was a dating app. I was like,
How do you think I met
married?
Fish?
I don't need this.
And on that note, so yes, like James said, if you anybody ever wants to be on the show with us, please shoot me an email, bill@comicartfans.com. We'd be happy to add you. And even if maybe you just want to suggest some topics to us too, please do that as well, because hearing what you want us to talk about would help us fashion the future shows. So we'd appreciate that as well.
Can I voluntold Marcus for the art of calf commenting?
You could. Hey, if Marcus would come on here and talk about that, I think Marcus probably commented on every single piece of art I posted, and I think I posted like 24 pieces of art, and he commented on all of them. So yes, he would be a good choice for that. All right. Well, again, great show, everybody. I appreciate it. We'll definitely be back here next Sunday, and I've got a full schedule all week. I've got the $500 show tomorrow, and then I've got NSN Art, Michael, I'll butcher his last name, Delarie, will be on Tuesday with me for a Comic Art Live chat, and then a regular Dueling Dealers episode on Wednesday, and then the 55th CAF update on Thursday. So much for me taking some time off. But again, we'll see you guys next week, and thank you again to Fish and Mikhail and Chris and James. Another great show.
Pleasure, man.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed all the topics. It was really interesting.
Ditto.